Alright guys, it's Scrappy here today. Hope you're doing well and enjoying your day so far. Major roster developments last night. Toronto officially blow up their team. They've made one change already, but rumours are they are looking at a second, and the players they're interested in feature Nasty if they can get him off Boston, but if that doesn't work, they might be looking at getting Kenny back again if he is willing to move to Toronto. Loads of moving pieces here, especially because OpTic went on to play the new Toronto team in Scrims last night, and it was an absolute bloodbath from start to finish. Remember to throw your thoughts in the comments, hit the like button if you enjoy, subscribe if you're new as always, I greatly appreciate it. We're going to dive straight in because challenges is real interesting as well. The FaZe Falcons are officially here, so it's all kind of confusing. Zuma is still looking at bringing on Stallions teams, but of course he's part of FaZe, even though there's been talk about Stallions even getting a spot in the Pro League and all this, what that would mean. Probably he would have to cease ties with FaZe and all that kind of, well, Nejra left OpTic, started 100 Thieves, all that type of stuff. But the Falcons are at it again. Now, it's worth noting here, Falcons still have their Academy Green and their Academy White, as far as I understand. So they've still got their Academy rosters that they're paying money for, and, well, now they've got another one, effectively, partnering with FaZe. So, a couple of the Saudi boys with Paulex and Swooty. That is the setup. So, it's all rather strange, in my opinion. I know that Zuma was talking quite a lot about Luka and trying to get him onto either that roster or onto the Stallions. Now, it looked like that was going to happen, but then there was a change, and Luka's actually ended up on the Falcons Academy Green in place of Manny. So, it's QK, Roxas, Standy, and Luka. That is now the team of 4 over there. All kind of interesting. Like, Luka had so much gas after that one Challengers Cup. He got signed to FaZe as a consequence. And look, has it worked out for FaZe? Arguably, yes. Drazah seemingly got back in the lab and started playing much better, and that resulted in a good run at Major 1 that maybe they wouldn't have had otherwise. It certainly looked pretty unlikely that they would be on the verge of a grand finals. I mean, they should have been there. Certainly in their eyes, I'm sure they will say after the Neptune masterclass and that Colossus. Didn't look like that was going to happen in December time, but it happened at the end of January. So Luka was to a certain extent a part of that, but also, you know, they paid a big buyout for him because tons of teams were interested. And has he made massive progress in challenges? No, not really. Obviously played with Fellow for some time. Still think he's a good player, but it's not like he's, wow, this, you got to get this guy, FaZe have got to put him in right now, or some team have got to load him off the roster, or whatever. QK feels almost more likely to get promoted, maybe to Falcons, or he turned down the Cloud9 offer, as we understand as well, as did many. Roxas, Stanley, that is that roster. Zuma was talking a little bit about this and says, like, this was the team that Luka wanted. You know, I tried to get him that roster. He was, you know, ready to sketch on his team, whatever, to make that happen. But in the end, it didn't happen. And, well, Luka ended up elsewhere on the Falcons Academy. So Zuma still has his thing going on. Of course, Swooty's still a part of the Zuma FaZe Falcons kind of Stallions team. It's all a little bit confusing. Maybe there's going to be some proper Stallions rosters back in due course as well, because the Challengers Cup's coming up in a couple of days' time, so teams have got to be finalised rather swiftly. And ReeaL is also back down to Challengers because of the confirmation yesterday. So, Toronto say, roster update for the remainder of Stage 2, ReeaL moves to the bench while we test a new look. We will revisit the lineup after Major 2, which is pretty interesting. So, look, this was coming, ReeaL was struggling hard, his performances on LAN and online were, nowhere near where they need to be. He was excellent, I think, on Miami last year. Then all the drama happens, right? We think something in the ballpark of Miami were paying him like 75k. Toronto came along and said, okay, we're happy to double that if you come play for us. Heretics got the verbal agreement from ReeaL, but as we understand, that didn't go very far, and he ends up on Toronto. Possibly part of the reason why Toronto was so keen to get him is because it's now Toronto Koi, right? They've partnered with the Spanish thing, it's no longer the Ultra, and maybe they wanted a piece of that. Look, if ReeaL was to magically spawn in tomorrow back on Heretics and they could forget that all the drama and the beef ever happens, I think that ReeaL would be playing a much better COD in that environment. Whether that's something that Heretics would consider, I don't know, right? Like, how deep does that beef run? Do I think that the team, in theory, could be better off if, let's say, Metals was gone and they brought ReeaL in? Like, I do rate Metals. I think he's been a quality player for a long time. He was part of the classic Heretics team back in Black Ops 4 as well. But if there is a weak link with Trakes making improvements and Rencor and Super being ultra consistent and just excellent in general last year and this, especially Rencor so far, that would be something that might be worth considering if the bridges aren't fully burned, which they might be. So Toronto have made a one-man move. ReeaL's to the bench, and it's Kips who's officially coming in. But they say that they'll revisit the lineup after Major 2, which kind of implies after Major 2, then they will consider further moves. But they might consider further moves before then, because many would say, and I get the logic, is a one-man change really enough? Should Insight also be out of there, right? Does this game, the way that it's played, suit a very traditional, slower AR style like Insight? Arguably not. But he's boys with CleanX, right? They've been a duo before Simp and aBeZy were a duo, pretty much. Like, that's how far that goes back. And they're still playing together today, and Simp and aBeZy are broken up after 7-8 years. So that just shows how integral CleanX and Insight have been, but at some point, you might have to give up on it, right? So Kips is officially in. Of course, comes off the Huntsman. It's also fantastic for the scene that this has happened. OpTic, they make the Huntsman this year. They commit to a Challengers team finally. Nium's been promoted already. Kips has been promoted. I think Renegade is going to get promoted at some point this season. Somebody's going to sign him, I think. I certainly would be, I think, if I was managing some of these Pro League teams. But Kips, certainly after Nium. Some would even say Kips maybe before Nium. Key prospect on this lineup. Gonna flex for this team, I'd imagine. And it's a great story for challengers, but also for other players in challengers. They're like, okay, well, if I can play for the Huntsman, my chances of getting promoted are looking pretty good, in the same way that that's been true for the Stallions in the past. So it's great to see some new names, some new faces in the Pro League. And, well, as JoeDeceives says, my new guy, Skips, man, welcome. It looked like JoeDeceives was pretty checked out after the last week. The performances that he was having, the team was having. Bean says, congrats, man. Is WhatsApp down? Does anyone know? So, like, Bean is trying to get back in, of course. And, look, if not for Mercules, I think that Toronto team might still look kind of different. ReeaL has therefore gone to Omit Brooklyn. So it's all kind of interesting. Aluka no longer on that team. He's gone to the Falcons Academy Green, as we discussed. It's now Asim, ReeaL, Brack and Fellow. That's now the new Omit Brooklyn team. So yeah, lots of things changing. But many would say, is a one-man move enough? I think people generally in favour of like, yeah, let's just get CleanX back on the sub alongside JoeDeceives. It only makes sense. Bring in someone who can actually flex. Seemingly they tried it with ReeaL, but it didn't really work. But is Insight also the man for the job? And as Ronnie points out, they are looking at replacements for Insight. Earlier today, he reported that there's interest in acquiring Nasty from Boston. Now, Benjay did mention this on the flag, and he was shut down kind of quickly. But there is plenty of logic here. Now, first of all, they should have just done this in the off-season, let's be honest, right? Like, Nasty was available off of that Surge team. All of his teammates were getting signed to quality rosters. Nasty's been a very solid player now for years and pretty damn consistent at that. He was excellent on Surge last year in large part. The fact that he ended up on Boston, as much as I still kind of like that Boston team, Toronto, I think, should have made that move in the off-season when they had the chance to. Now, if they want to do it, there's going to have to be a buyout involved. Would Boston sell him? I mean, look, if Boston sell him, they're kind of chalking up their season to a degree, and I don't imagine that Snoopy will be very happy about that, given that, you know, finally Snoopy has a quality teammate. Obviously, Slasher was there as well, but at least for a decent stint of time to bring in Nasty, that felt like it was a move in the right direction for Boston after last season. Maybe that could be its start of them more consistently mixing it up on Sundays. But if you lose Nasty, it's like, well, you're kind of chalking it up. But if the money's right, it might make sense. But as I say, for Toronto, it's going to be difficult to justify that, because you could have got him basically for free a few months ago, and now you've got to pay a big buyout for him. Not sure how, you know, that really sits. And Boston might not be willing to sell anyway. I think it would make sense for Nasty and for Toronto if they could get the job done. but that doesn't seem so likely. As a result, they're also looking at Kenny. Now, this is very interesting, and people will say, oh my god, he's done it again. Kenny's finessed himself another roster spot. But I do see the logic. There was some talk about it previously, and even in the off-season, and actually Ronnie does say that Kenny was wanted by Toronto in the off-season. So that was a rumour that they were looking at Kenny and Drazah, I think, as a potential AR duo over there at Toronto. That didn't happen in the end because Kenny got the Thieves offer. So there is some logic there. And look, would Toronto be better off with a Kenny, a faster paced AR to an extent than an Insight? Possibly, right? Like, I'm not sure it's a massive upgrade, and I do still have some belief in Insight in a way, just because I saw at the World Cup last year, he played a bit faster and he was super impactful, but it's not been the case so far in BO7. It's not like Kenny had a good start either. So yeah, people would definitely make controversial comments on this, and for understandable reasons. And also, Kenny would have to relocate to Toronto because that's where they're based, and that is a bit of a hurdle as well. So it does look like Toronto are interested, and if they can't get Nasty, then Kenny would be probably a top option for them. They also say, Ronnie says, Kenny has interest also from Boston. So in the hypothetical world where maybe Nasty is gone, they bring in Kenny. I mean, that might make sense financially because you can sell Nasty and then bring in Kenny effectively on a free, presumably. Or you let him potentially join anyway, and he joins alongside Nasty instead of Cammy or something. I don't know, it's all interesting, but the fact of the matter is that Kenny can be gone, and he may decide to take a break or even retire or call it a day. But it doesn't seem to matter with Kenny. Like, it doesn't matter how bad things go. The players still rate him on a level where he will still get interest even from reasonable teams. It's no longer going to be like the top teams, but the teams in that kind of mid-pack are like, you know what, Kenny could add value here. And I think he could, but again, does it make sense for both parties? There are questions on that. But it does look like Kenny at least has some opportunities here. I mean, for example, Cloud9, obviously. But Cloud9 were interested. They were like, yeah, we'll pay you the min, the super min, the half min, whatever, the 24k. And Kenny was like, yeah, no, I'm not doing that, which is fair enough. But other teams who wouldn't pay them in, they're also in the conversation. So here's Nasty creeping back into the Telluride bush because he doesn't want to comment too much on the story right now, but something's clearly going on. That can very much so be said. Now, as a result of all that, Toronto was scrimming OpTic last night, and I don't have all the screenshots here, but OpTic had 2 scrim sets. They played G2, and they slammed them 8-0. They then played Toronto, the new Toronto. Now, I know this is one screenshot, but Insight did have a pretty rough map here, with Kips, CleanX, JoeDeceives all looking pretty good. Insight was 13 and 28, so there was a bit of talk about this map. This was just another one on the Colossus, just to show, you know, that Mercules is him. I think that's probably Mercules at 37 and 20. But anyway, it was a bit of a baptism of fire for Kips and for Toronto. Now, OpTic yesterday were on great form, right? They'd had the match against G2 in the Pro League the other day, and it was, you know, they went down 2-0, they had to reverse sweep it. But they 8-0'd them in scrims. So this really was Toronto coming up against an absolute juggernaut. And, well, they eventually get 8-0 slammed as well across the hardpoint and the control. So, or the overload. Couldn't have been a much better day for OpTic in many respects. And maybe Toronto will look at that scrim set and say, we've brought in Kips for ReeaL. That seems to be, it's got to be worth a try. It's got to be a step in the right direction, you would think. But is that going to be enough, right? Do we need to make another move? Ganzeri actually did the numbers here on the G2 and Koi series, just looking at Mercules' stats, because, look, you're playing your first ever game as Kips in the Pro League in a streamed scrim against Mercules, and he drops a 1.34 over 16 maps on the day. It is what it is. What can you do? So, yeah, tweet your thoughts in the comments. This actually was one final screenshot here of them playing Koi on the Scar Overload. It was a close one. It was a 3-2. It wasn't, you know, an absolute bloodbath every single map. But when you win 16 maps straight, there's obviously a little bit of work to be done. There was also this clip with Insight snaking pretty hard, so they were down at this point 55 to 120. You can see Insight in the back here in a gunfight against Dashy. Insight hits the 1, hits the 2, hits the jump shot, and this map he started off pretty well. He was 15 and 11, so like Insight knew it was getting streamed, needed to make sure he turned up for the one time, and you know, maybe he's kept his spot for another day, but it does feel like there are alternatives that Toronto are considering. So very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.